be on the 23rd. All right, wow, all right. Good, so Hanukkah, it's Hanukkah, and we are in quite the season. There's a lot to be less than hopeful about this year. Just when you look at the world around, clearly you have, on top of everything else, let me just say it like this, because, if this was September or the first week of October, I could have said the same thing. So I'll just say, on top of everything else, like in the culture and other things that, that's going on top of all of that, we now have, of course, this war in Israel that is really sad. It's a catastrophe all the way around. It's just a catastrophe. No one enjoys the loss of life. Well, some people enjoy the loss of life. We don't enjoy the loss of life. Jewish people don't enjoy the loss of life. Israelis don't enjoy the loss of life. I feel myself going on a tangent. The Israeli Defense Forces don't enjoy seeing the loss of life. Others enjoy that, but not Israel. So it is a catastrophe completely, and with really no real end in sight. Real end in sight. In sight means of what we can see, right? And so there's a lot to be really concerned about. Israel is, I will say this, regardless of what you see on TV, Israel is functioning as a nation. I mean, people go out, people go to the Western Wall. I saw a video of people dancing and singing at the Western Wall. People are not like in their bunkers. We would be, right? If we think about it as Americans, that we would be. But no, I was talking to Hadass, my daughter-in-law, and she was talking about meeting up with a friend and, at a restaurant, like a cafe, and a play date with my little granddaughter and another little one. So life goes on, but there's a particular tension. It's not completely normal, but that's what's happening in Israel. And then around the world, and here in the United States, this anti-Jewish fervor that defies our sensibilities, right? Some of you saw you've been watching the news, so you see it not only on college campuses, but all over the country, an anti-Jewish, not only speech, but actions as well. Some of you may have seen the testimony of the presidents of Harvard and UPenn and MIT. Ay, ay, ay. Right? I mean, it was just hard. It was painful to watch. And I didn't watch it while it was happening, but watched it later, in small clips. But it was painful to watch that calls for Jewish genocide is okay in certain circumstances. Basically is what they said. And then they all, perhaps trying to save their jobs, all gave like another version afterwards. I wasn't thinking. That was my favorite one from, I believe it was UPenn, right? I wasn't thinking. You're in front of Congress. A senator is asking you a question. How can you be distracted? Maybe a freshman at UPenn might give that answer, but not the president of the university, right? It's all scary stuff. And then, what do I hear? What do I see? But the synagogue where I grew up, where my parents were members for decades, where I went to Hebrew school, where everything I learned about being Jewish, I learned at Temple Israel in Albany, New York, had shots fired at it. Free Palestine, boom, boom, boom. Right? Did you see that on the news? You got to know what's going on, folks. Okay? That was unbelievable. I could not believe that. How surreal is that to see that where you grew up. So there was that. Boy, it's a tough time. It's a tough time. But Hanukkah, for us, I'm going to suggest, is not just a remembrance of the past, but it is really a holiday of hope. Of hope not only historically, but even in the present and the future. Okay? By the way, I just want to say a big thank you to Chris and also to Kevin for at the last minute working this all up with our projector and all that. So thank you. I really appreciate that. Okay. So anyway, what is Hanukkah about? As I look around the room, I think most of us might know, but when I hear, well, we have visitors, we don't know. So I don't know if people really know what Hanukkah is. It is not the Jewish version of Christmas, right? That's certainly sometimes. I think people mostly would not verbalize that. But I do think most people kind of think that. Well, it's like the Jewish version of Christmas. But it's not, at all. It coincidentally takes place at the same time of year. Okay? And I will also say this, that, the gift giving at Hanukkah is really mostly real gifts, not the gelt and dreidels. But you go to the store, you buy presents for your kids and, different kinds of things and so on. That is really a 20th century invention of immigrants who came to the United States. Historically, it was not really a gift-giving holiday. It was just a fun holiday, okay? So what is it? It's the celebration of the victory of the Maccabees over the Greco-Syrians. Why do we call them Greco-Syrians? Because we want to impress everybody. But besides that, because the king was a part of the Greek Empire that had been divided up into 4 parts. So that's why it's called the Greco-Syrian Empire, or the Greco-Syrian king. Right? What were they called? Anybody know? What were they called? Seleucids. Okay? Seleucids. All right, so there you go. The celebration of the victory of the Maccabees over the Greco-Roman Syrians, who conquered Jerusalem and desecrated the temple, forbade Jewish religious practices, and tormented the people. It was not simply they came to the temple and put up a statue and wanted people to worship. They had when I say they conquered Jerusalem, if they had television cameras, right, we would see a really disastrous situation. And so that is very important to see, and that's a reason why it kind of reminds us even today, of the Maccabees coming and retaking the temple and so on, and what's happening today. It's not the same set of circumstances, right? So we don't want to get that. It's not the same set of circumstances, but it is the same basically kind of situation in this sense. And so it was a horrible time. You can read about it in 1st and 2nd Maccabees. We don't have time to, I was going to read some passages, but we don't have time for it. But it goes into detail on what they did to the people. And it was horrific. Horrific. It's kind of interesting also that we also read about martyrdom about people willing to die rather than succumb to the Syrian regime. We read about a man named Eleazar. We read about Hannah and her 7 sons. And they were all willing to die. It's called Kiddush Hashem in Hebrew, which is the holiness of the name. The holiness of the name. And the idea is not Hashem as in God. It's Hashem as the name. Okay? The holiness of the name. And the idea is that I'm demonstrating holiness by persevering, and so on. So it really was a horrible time. The holiday is the Maccabees, right? The Maccabees recapturing the temple, cleansing the temple, and dedicating the temple. It was this great victory by a small group of people, basically, and the holiday, of course, lasts for 8 days. Why does it last for 8 days? It lasts for 8 days because when they dedicated the temple, according to the testimony in Maccabees, that they wanted to make it like Sukkot. They wanted to make it like Sukkot. And so Sukkot is 7 days plus Shmini Atzeret, right? The extra day, 8 days. And so they decided to make Hanukkah 8 days long. And the name Hanukkah means a dedication. We had a great time with our kids last Sunday talking about that. And about the meaning of the word Hanak, Hanukkah. You know, for most of us here, there is a famous verse in the Bible that it's never translated as dedicate, but it's real famous, especially if you like to look up verses about child rearing and things of that nature, right? In Proverbs 22, you know that verse, train up a child. The word train there is chanak. It's really what it is dedicate from the beginning, like inaugurate, dedicate from the beginning. And so the word means dedication. What we did with our kids is we went around the room and asked them to say, how are you dedicated to God? What are some ways you're dedicated to God? And boy, they were really great. One said that when you decide to do something, isn't that great? When you decide to do something. In other words, she couldn't articulate it exactly, but when you dedicate your life to something. Isn't that a little girl, when you plan to do something. Another one said is, like if you write a book, and in the front of it, you write dedicated to, right? And another one said, if you give somebody something. Those are the main answers of what dedicate means, right? So I said, yes. That whether you're giving something to someone or you're honoring someone in the, in writing a book, or you're planning to do something, you're setting something aside for a purpose. Whether it's your life, a gift, an artistic work that you do, or whatever it may be. And then we went around the room about how you dedicate yourself to God. So Hanukkah is the Feast of Dedication. And of course, isn't it interesting? We'll get there in a few minutes. But in the Gospel of John, it's called the Feast of Dedication, right? In John chapter 10, Yeshua was in Jerusalem at the Feast of Dedication. And so you know what that tells us, by the way? That tells us that in a very short period of time, Hanukkah became an established tradition. Because what it tells us is that by the time you get to the first century, it was an established tradition. Very, very, very interesting. But we all know, and we all learned, as I did at Temple Israel at 600 New Scotland Avenue in Albany, New York, The miracle of the oil accentuates the spiritual dimension of the victory of God over evil. The miracle of the oil. What about the miracle of the oil? Right? So this is really very interesting. In the rabbinic tradition, it's quite interesting that, and it's quite obvious if you read different things, that they had a real desire to make sure that in the celebration of Hanukkah, as well as other holidays, that we remember not just the victory, not just the military victory, or not just the military victory with some of God's help, but a victory of God. And so we know that in the Mishnah and the Talmud, the Mishnah was the codification of the laws after the destruction of the temple around 200 AD. Then you have the Talmud, which is this Mishnah, and then many, many, many layers of explanation of the codification of the laws. That's what the Talmud is. But Phil, we shouldn't get the idea that when they were published, so to speak, that's when they were written down. That's when everything was written down. They were oral traditions, and we don't know how far back they go. But one thing's for sure is that the miracle of the oil is the central feature since maybe 200-300 CE, Common Era, after Yeshua, right? That's why we light a Hanukkah menorah. Where do you think, when you think about Jewish traditions, everything about the Seder to how you, about lighting a menorah, and then how you light the menorah, were all discussed and decided by the rabbis long after the holiday and after the days of Yeshua. By the way, did you know everything was a decision? Which way you light the candles and all that. But even more so, did you know that there was a discussion that on Hanukkah, what you do is on the first night, you light all the candles. And then on the second night, you light 7, then 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and boop. And then it's over. In other words, you start with all the candles and you go down. That was a discussion in the Talmud. But the majority view won, and that is the way we do it, which makes sense, really, right? You don't want to end with no light, right? It really, the idea is, isn't it great that every night you add more light, and it's, that's kind of thematic, right? So we're glad that they came up with that. I won't take the time now, but ask me later or sometime about why the mezuzah is tilted in. That's another good one. But anyway, the miracle of the oil accentuates the spiritual dimension of the victory of God. What is the miracle of the oil? There was only a little oil, and here, let's say it like this. Let's say it was today, and we needed our phones, right? But there was only 1% of power, and it lasted for 8 days. What a miracle that would be, right? Wow. And it was, a big wow, that kind of miracle, right? That little bit of oil lasted for 8 days, symbolizing the presence of God, the victory of God, the provision of God as well. And that's why we light Hanukkah candles. That's why we have potato pancakes. That's why you have sufganiyot. What a great word that is. Sufganiyot, the sort of kind of donuts. They're not really donuts, but the sort of kind of Israeli pastry. A sufganiyot made with oil. Oil. That's, I'm not so sure they used vegetable oil when they lit the candles, but I don't know. Well, yeah, maybe, right? Olive oil, right? What do I know? I don't know, all right? I wasn't there, okay? But they used oil. Probably it wasn't petroleum, right? Let's go with that. Probably it was not like what you're going to put in your car. All right? Okay. Very good. So for centuries, because of this victory, okay, so for centuries, Hanukkah has served as an inspiration to the Jewish people. Jewish identity, the land, freedom, the providential care of God. It inspired generations. It inspired the Zionists. It inspired people in every generation, Jewish people in every generation, like in the Middle Ages, you know, when there was great persecution, it inspired them to keep going, because embedded in Hanukkah is this sense of God will redeem us. God will save us. God will not see the end of us. And that is like embedded in I think in Jewish thought, Jewish teaching, Jewish life. You know, in the Siddur, it's kind of interesting. In the Amidah on Hanukkah, you have a little section. I think it's in the Amidah. Anyway, oh no, did I lose my spot? Oh no, here it is. Thank you. So there are prayers of thanksgiving for Hanukkah, right? One of them I remember. In fact, this is so spontaneous. Let's see if I can sing this. Al ha-nisim v'al ha-purkam v'al ha-gevurot v'al ha-teshuot v'al milchamot she'asita lavotenu bayamim hahem bazman hazeh. That was a little off key, but that's basically how it goes. And some of you remember Al ha-nisim v'al ha-purkan. It's very famous. We thank you for the miracles, the redemption, the mighty deeds, and the victories in battle which you performed for our ancestors in those days at that time. And then there's this long paragraph. In the days of Mattityahu, son of Yochanan the high priest, the Hasmonean and his sons, the wicked Greek kingdom rose up against your people Israel, to make them forget your Torah and to force them to transgress the statutes of your will. It was then that you, in your great compassion, stood by them in the time of their distress. You championed the cause, judged their claim, and avenged their wrong. You delivered the strong into the hands of the weak, the many into the hands of the few, the impure into the hands of the pure, the wicked into the hands of the righteous, and the arrogant into the hands of those who are engaged in the study of your Torah. You made for yourself great and holy renown in your world and for your people Israel. You performed a great salvation and redemption as of this day. And then it goes on. But this is the kind of praise and the sense of Hanukkah, that this is what God has done. This is what God has done. It might surprise you to learn that very few Jewish people are familiar with 1st and 2nd Maccabees. I mean, hardly anybody. I'm going to say hardly anybody is familiar with 1st and 2nd Maccabees. They're written in Greek. They're not part of the Torah. They're not in the. It's not in the Bible. And so, mostly what most Jewish people know are these prayers and the lighting of the oil, and that's okay, because it is about the miracle of God. It's good to know the history clearly, but it really is about the miracle of God. Whether it be in the days of the Maccabees, whether it be in the days of Yeshua, whether it be today. Now, there is a biblical a biblical basis of this hope that we have. It's not only looking at it historically, but in Daniel, the book of Daniel, in the 8th chapter, we kind of have the Hanukkah story, right? Not as a narrative of what took place, but as a prophetic statement that pointed far into the distant future, right? You may be familiar with it. You had here in chapter 8, I'm just going to read a little bit of it. So Daniel has this vision, right? So he sees a ram which had 2 horns, and it was standing in front of the canal. Now the 2 horns were long, but one was longer than the other, one coming up last. I saw the ram butting westward, northward, southward, east, and westward, northward, and southward, and no other beast could stand before it, nor was there anyone to rescue from his power, but he did as he pleased and magnified himself. While I was observing, wow, look! Doesn't really say that, but a male goat was coming from the west over the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground. And the goat had a conspicuous horn between his eyes. And he came up to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing in front of the canal, and rushed at him in his mighty wrath. And I saw him come beside the ram, and he was enraged at him. And he struck the ram and shattered his 2 horns, and the ram had no strength to withstand him. So he hurled him to the ground and trampled on him, and there was none to rescue the ram from his power. Then the male goat magnified himself exceedingly. But as soon as he was mighty, the large horn was broken. And in its place there came up 4 conspicuous horns toward the 4 winds of heaven. And out of one of them came forth a rather small horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the beautiful land. And it grew up to the horn of heaven, and caused some of the host and some of the stars to fall to the earth, and it trampled them down. And even magnified itself to be equal with the commander of the host. And it removed the regular sacrifice from him, and the place of his sanctuary was thrown down. And on account of transgression, the host will be given over to the horn, along with the regular sacrifice, and it will fling truth to the ground and perform its will and prosper. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to that particular one who was speaking, how long will the vision about the regular sacrifice apply, while the transgression causes horror, so as to allow both the holy place and the host to be trampled? And he said to me, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the holy place will be properly restored. Okay? Now, thankfully, we have given to Daniel an interpretation of it, so we don't have to guess. Okay? So he says, behold, I'm going to let you know what will occur at the final period of the indignation, for it pertains to the appointed time of the end. The ram which you saw with the 2 horns represents Media and Persia. The shaggy goat represents the kingdom of Greece. And the large horn is its first king, or greatest king. And the broken horn and the 4 horns that arose in its place represent 4 kingdoms which will arise from his nation, although not with his power. And in the latter period of their rule, when the transgressors have run their course, a king will arrive, insolent, skilled in intrigue, and his power will be mighty, but not by his own power. And he will destroy to an extraordinary degree and prosper and perform his will. He will destroy mighty men and the holy people. And through his shrewdness, he will cause deceit to succeed by his influence. And he will magnify himself in his heart. And he will destroy many while they are at ease. And he will even oppose the Prince of Princes, but he will be broken without human agency. And the spirit of the evenings and mornings, which has been told, is true, but keep the vision secret, for it pertains to many days in the future. And so this really is this is what happens with Antiochus Epiphanes, the Magnificent. He identified, himself as a deity, and he desecrated the temple and caused sacrifice to stop. And what Gabriel is telling Daniel is that this is not just some kind of a geopolitical situation here, but that there is a heavenly battle that is taking place, that is manifesting itself here in the world with Antiochus Epiphanes and the Maccabees and all of it. And of course, we know that it is sort of like a foreshadowing, indeed, of the future, the ultimate future, as we'll see. But clearly, this is about Antiochus Epiphanes and the story of Hanukkah. And we see that there is victory at the end. And so the victory comes from God. It is a victory of God. And so it gives us hope for the future. Well, the rabbis, when they came up with the Torah portions and Haftorah portions for holidays, decided that the Haftorah portion for Zechariah, and that's kind of late, that was like later than the Talmud even, decided in Zechariah chapter 4 would be the Haftorah portion for, here, I got so excited I didn't do what I was supposed to do. Okay, there you go. All right, there you go. Desecration of the temple, victory over time of the end. Okay, there we are. We're caught up. All right. So in Zechariah chapter 4, you have a vision of eternal light of the menorah. And it's a very interesting, if you've ever tried to draw it out, you ever try to do that? It describes a menorah, and it has it has 7 places for the oil. And then out of that comes 7 other places for the oil. And then it's connected to 2 olive trees on either side. And the idea is that the oil is ever flowing, that the light will always be there, ever flowing. Now, the vision was given to Zechariah to encourage him about Jerusalem and about the rebuilding of the temple, right? And that's that's very important to get. It wasn't about the Maccabees. Zechariah was not living in the 2nd century at the time of the Maccabees. He was before it, right? But it was about when the remnant came back to Jerusalem, they were greatly disappointed, and and they were kind of despondent over the whole thing. Read Haggai, the companion of Zechariah. They were distraught over this, and they were not encouraged. They were discouraged about Jerusalem and about building the temple. And so God gave this vision to Hezekiah, right? And in chapter 4, in verse 6, right? He says, what is this, right? And then the answer is, this is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel, saying, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord of hosts. Zerubbabel was the civil leader of Israel upon the return. Zechariah was the prophet, right? Okay, and so not by might, not by power, but by my spirit. In other words, yes, you will take the initiative, Zerubbabel. Begin rebuilding, but it's going to happen by the power of God, not just because you want to do it. And so this is an encouragement to you about rebuilding the temple, right? Interesting Jewish commentators view this as speaking about the Second Temple, but also looking forward to the final redemption, with an eye to the final redemption. In other words, it's sort of like what a lot of these, in a lot of prophetic statements, where the prophet has a view to the end, and in between now and the end, there are times when these kinds of things happen, leading to the end. Remember, we had a guest speaker, Walter Kaiser. Remember him? He coined a phrase, I don't know if it's a great phrase to depict this, but he coined a phrase called generic, like generic fulfillments. Not fulfillments, but just sort of like the same types of things happening. Like the promise of a messianic king, and in between the time of the promise of a messianic king and the coming of the messianic king, there's king after king after king after king. That kind of idea, right? And so Jewish commentators view this, again, as speaking about the Second Temple period, but looking forward to the final redemption. In other words, not by might, not by power, but by my Spirit. Just as God gave victory to the Maccabees, so God will give victory to Israel all the way to the end. And it will be because of what he is doing. So Hanukkah points to the ultimate victory of light over darkness and the messianic kingdom manifested in a world with a cleansed Jerusalem. And that is what Hanukkah looks forward to. You can read about it in Zechariah, in the 12th chapter, in the 14th chapter, about Jerusalem being a cleansed city. You read about a new Jerusalem. You read about it even in the book of Revelation, about a new Jerusalem, a restoration of Israel, a restoration of the kingdom. And so even today, you may have seen a video, you may have seen it yourself, but I posted a little video on Facebook of Israeli soldiers singing Ma'od Tzur. In a way, we've never sung Ma'od Tzur, probably because we're not Israeli soldiers fighting in a war right now. But it was a very effervescent, right? It was actually from an Israeli television news station that was reporting on it. And so they light the candles, and then they go into just a beautiful, it was the same tune, but they were just real excited about it. And so let's talk a little bit about this song, Ma'oz Tzur, Rock of Ages, right? Now, I don't want to burst any bubbles, but the English translation that we sing is different than what's in Hebrew. And that's okay, because what's in Hebrew doesn't really it doesn't work for a song. Some things just don't translate well. But the gist of what it's saying is what we sing, right? So I can never memorize it, so that's why. What do we sing? It's important that we understand that what we sing is really, again, it's the gist of what it is in Hebrew. But here we go. Hang on a minute. Here we are. Okay. We sing, Rock of Ages, let our song praise thy or your saving power. Thou amidst the raging foes wast our sheltering tower. Furiously they assailed us, but thine arm availed us, and thy word broke their sword when our own strength failed us. There's more, but you get the idea, right? That clearly there is this sense of what God has done. In the later verses, it does talk about the day when all will be free, and talking about the Olam Haba, the world to come. But there's something really very interesting about the Hebrew version. And what's very interesting about the Hebrew version is the end of it. I'm going to read it here. Let's see. Okay, so there's 8 stanzas, 8 or 9 stanzas. And it really is really retelling the story. In Hebrew, it's just basically retelling the story. It's more like a poem than like a folk song, okay? But at the end, the last stanza says this: "Bear your holy arm and hasten the time of salvation. Take retribution against the evil nation on behalf of your servants. For the hour of deliverance has been too long delayed. There seems no end to the evil days. Thrust the enemy into the darkness of death and establish for us the 7 shepherds." Now that's really interesting. Establish for us the 7 shepherds. Oh, there it is. And establish for us. Where does this come from? 7 shepherds. Okay. Well, we should know it because it's part of a famous messianic passage that we clearly only read one verse of, right? And that is in the 5th chapter of the book of Micah. We know well, here, we'll just read it. Now, in the TLV, it's verse 1. In the rest of your Bibles, it's in verse 2. "But as for you, Bethlehem Ephratah, too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you one will go forth for me to be ruler in Israel. His goings forth are from long ago, from the days of eternity. Therefore he will give them up until the time when she who is in labor has borne a child. Then the remainder of his brethren will return to the sons of Israel. And he will arise and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. And they will remain, because at that time he will be great to the ends of the earth. And this one will be our peace. When the Assyrian invades our land, when he tramples on our citadels, then we will raise up against him 7 shepherds and 8 leaders of men." Now that's really very interesting. So the way this is understood in the rabbinic world and in the Messianic Jewish world is that this is talking about how the Messiah is going to come from the clans of David. The Jewish world emphasizes he's going to come from David. The Christian world emphasizes he's going to be born in Bethlehem. But it's all it's one it's one truth, right? This idea here, when you read the whole thing, without going into all of the details, the 7 shepherds is not a literal number 7. It means like a complete number. Just like when you read in lots of places, for 3 transgressions and for 4. It's emphasizing a lot of transgressions, you know. So here, when it says 7 shepherds and 8 leaders, ample numbers of leaders, perhaps the entourage of the Messiah when he comes, those who will be leaders of the Messianic kingdom, who will arrive with the Messiah. What's interesting for us is that in Ma'od Sur, in the Hanukkah song of Ma'od Sur, at the end of it, it points to the Messianic days. That's the point. When he says 7 shepherds, it's talking about this passage, which speaks about these 7 shepherds. But also in this passage, really very interestingly, when you read it carefully, it says, therefore, in verse 3, therefore he will give them up until the time when she who is in labor has borne a child. This idea that Israel is going to suffer, basically, until this child is born. Or until this child is born and fulfills his complete reign, right, obviously. And so it's very interesting when you read, what Jewish people have to say about this passage, that all trouble of Israel points forward to the time of Jacob's trouble before the Messianic era. That, and of course, what did Yeshua say in the sermon, in the Olivet Discourse? Nation shall rise up against nation, but it's only the beginning of birth pangs, right? And the idea of the coming of the Messiah is like a painful birth, and in the big picture, it's not just talking about Yeshua being born in Bethlehem, but it's talking about the fulfillment of the messianic role that will take place when Yeshua returns. The promise of deliverance will come with victory of God, just like Hanukkah, light over the darkness. Now, it's interesting. I was reading some rabbinic commentary on Matthew 5, and they will say about the seven shepherds, that the seven shepherds perhaps are referring on one hand to the Maccabees, coming to reclaim the temple, coming to bring victory. It's just kind of it's just interesting, right? And then also, though, it points to the future, and they refer to it as the entourage of the Messiah. And so you see the connection between here Hanukkah and a view to the end. How Hanukkah gives us this encouragement, right? So Yeshua, of course, is the light of the world. He is indeed the light of the world. He is indeed the Savior, the Deliverer, right? The eternal light, we could say, entered the temple. And it was that cleansed temple that Yeshua did come into. Now, notice I have here, he is the good shepherd. And that's really very interesting because there was a woman, Aileen Gilding, I think her name was. She wrote a book about the Gospel of John and how, according to her, that it is written according to the cycles of Jewish holy days. It's interesting. And what she says in the book is that in the first century, Ezekiel chapter 34 was read at Hanukkah. Perhaps having to do with that passage in Micah about the shepherds. He will shepherd his flock, and he's going to come with 7 shepherds. This messianic king who's descended from David is going to be a shepherd. And so it's very interesting that in Ezekiel 34, you have this judgment on false shepherds of Israel. And isn't it interesting that in John chapter 10, of all places, at Hanukkah, Yeshua calls himself, he's the good shepherd. He's the shepherd who's coming. He's the shepherd. He's the light. He is the deliverer. He is what the Maccabees pointed to. And we know that when he came, he fulfilled his calling of dying and being raised from the dead and ascending to the right hand of the Father. Yes, truly a victory. And we know that he poured out the Ruach, and it was the very beginning of the world to come. And we are still now waiting for its complete fulfillment. And when that happens is when clearly Jerusalem will be cleansed. Jerusalem will be once again the center of the spiritual world, and the nations will come and worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and so on. So when we light our menorah, we should be thinking about all of this, right? We light our menorah, meaning that God protected us. He gives us light He is the light, light over darkness. It reminds us of the victory of the Maccabees. It reminds us of the hope for the future as a messianic community. It reminds us of Yeshua, the one who is the light. But it also reminds us that he said that we are the lights of the world. That we are lights of the world. And as we light the menorah, and that's why it's great to light more than one candle each night, right? So that we see that, wow, the Shamish candle, right? That certainly does remind us of Yeshua. The Shamish, the servant candle. And you know how you light your menorah. You light the Shamish candle with the match, and then you take the Shamish candle and you light the other candles. And so the servant candles gives light to the other candles. And so we could say, just as a nice symbol, that we are the individual candles, right? And of course, it always is kind of nice when the Shamish is in the middle, but it doesn't always have to be, okay? That's another thing, okay? It doesn't have to be in the middle. Some are very artistic where the Shamish is like stuck out on the side or, different, it's just an artistic thing. But when it's in the middle, it really does give us a great symbol of the community of Messiah, because we could say we are Jews and Gentiles joined by the Shamish candle. And so Yeshua said in Matthew 15 that we are lights of the world. And then Paul also says that to this crooked and perverse generation, we are lights. And so we become the light of the menorah. So when we celebrate Hanukkah today, and we think about everything going on in the world, yes, we look to the future. We say there is hope for the future. There is the final redemption. God promised it, and we look forward to it. But in the meantime, we are called to be the light of the menorah. And may we defeat darkness and evil by the way that we live, right? That is how we overcome the evil. In Titus chapter 2, there's a great passage that I think points so much to what we're saying. When Paul is writing to Titus, he says this. I'll be just about done. Okay, in Titus chapter 2, beginning in verse 11. For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation to all men, instructing us to deny ungodliness and worldly desires, and to live sensibly, righteously, and godly in the present age. That's kind of like being lights now, right? Looking for the blessed hope, the end of the Hanukkah story, looking for the blessed hope and the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior, Messiah Yeshua. By the way, this is one of the few places where it says, our great God and Savior, Messiah Yeshua, who gave himself for us that he might redeem us from every lawless deed and purify for himself a people for his own possession, zealous for good deeds. It's like we're the temple, right? He recaptured us. He's like the good shepherd, maybe accompanied by the 7 shepherds, right? Who recaptures Jerusalem, who recaptures the temple, who destroys the evil, who cleanses the temple as he purifies us. He redeems us from every lawless deed and purifies for himself a people for his own possession. And then for what? Just to pat ourselves on the back and say, wow, isn't that great? No, zealous for good deeds. And that is how we are dedicated to God today. It's not just look to the future. Yes, it's look to the future, but with a present reality, and we play a role in that future by the way we live now. And of course, one of my favorite verses is the verse after it where it says, "These things speak and exhort and reprove with all authority. Let no one disregard you." So pay attention, okay? And so we are like the temple. Let us live and let us be the hope that people can see, the living Yeshua. Let us be that hope. Boy, Israel, Jewish people need that hope, that there really is a future reality. There really is. And you can see what it kind of looks like, you know? And in the body of Messiah, there is real unity. There is unity of Jews and people of all kinds of nationalities, including Palestinian nationalities, right? This is where the hope is. There's no, in the morass of everything happening, where is the hope? The hope is in Messiah Yeshua. And so as we light our menorah, may we truly bring and be light to this world. And so let us pray, and we'll be all set. Lord God,